Hey, folks, happy Friday, and welcome to another episode of Plan A Conversation. So, listen, if you are in the United States, you probably have had a extra day off this week in Veterans Day. Happy shout out to my sister, happy birthday, who celebrated her birthday yesterday. And so she has been my lifelong best friend. If you all know about my podcast and duration of time that I've been here, I talk about her often. We are, I think, maybe 11, 12 months apart. And so we have grown up being, I think, is it Irish twins is the definition of kids who are really close together. And so we have been that. And so I wish her a happy birthday and many more. And again, if you were taking the Veterans Day off, I hope you did it in observation for all of the people who have come and sacrificed so much for our country here in the United States. And so, listen, let's go ahead and segue to today's conversation. The gentleman that you are seeing on the screen, if you are viewing the podcast, and then also for our audio guests, if you're listening to the podcast, the voice you're about to hear, you might have recognized from previous season before. And just let me give a setup before I welcome Michael Whidden to the show. Years ago, I was invited to a cheese and wine event at the 92nd Street Y here in New York City. And when I met Michael, who was on the podcast before, as I said, and he shared his story about being an attorney and then discovering the world of wine and what that transition has been like for him. I thought I had to have him on the podcast. And so here he is now. He's back, and we have a lot more to catch up on and to share. And so without further ado, Michael, welcome back to the conversation.
Clay, it's really great to be with you. Thanks so much for talking the other day. And I'm really excited to be on with you to talk about, this other story that you found interesting. And I hope some people find motivating and interesting.
Yeah, very much so. And so, Michael, just to give our audience who did not have a chance to catch up with you in a previous podcast episode, and folks, I'll be able to link that in the show notes so you can get a chance to hear that as well. We were in person last time, and you shed light on your career moving from being an attorney into the world of wine. If you can just give us a small recap, just for anyone who doesn't know how that transition happened.
Yeah, so I had been a corporate lawyer at a big law firm in New York City, and then a smaller firm for about 8 years total. After about 8 years, it was a mutual parting of ways, I think, just in terms of the firm that I was working at, and it gave me an opportunity to kind of reevaluate what I wanted to do. And I liked wine. I had never really loved it before, but what I realized is that while I was a lawyer, I had invented a wine glass, or tried to invent a wine glass, and that never actually made to fruition totally. But when I was looking at opportunities in wine, and I initially contemplated the idea of working in sales, I was like, oh, I can't really do sales because I've just been a lawyer. But then I realized that that invention that I tried to work on was really sales. And to me, it ties to, if anybody's ever read or familiar with Steve Jobs's autobiography or a kid story, one of the things he talks about is how he audited a calligraphy class after he dropped out of school. And that calligraphy class that he took way back when was this random data point that actually became fundamental to Apple's identity decades later. So to me, my story, that was one of the things that was just interesting, was that some kind of random activity that frankly cost way too much time and money was really the hook for me to get into wine. And I've been in wine since 2010 now. And I think to me, it's been gratifying, and it's cliche, but it's true that when you do what you love, it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't mean that it's perfect. It doesn't mean that you don't have bad days or have frustrations. Right. But when I do the work, I do it because I care about the wineries that I work with. I care about the clients that I work with, and I appreciate the opportunities that my employer has given me. So I've been doing that now for 11 years.
Yeah. And I love what you're just saying, because yesterday on social media, I had made this post about I am committed to having more fun. And as in the body of the message, I was telling people that, listen, because I love what I do, it does not seem like I'm working, because it's meaningful work, it's creative, and it has that level of impact. But I'm learning, to have a little bit, more fun as I create, the work that I'm doing. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And so before we get into one of the big reasons why I wanted to talk to you and catch up, what was COVID like for you? I'm really curious to know what that experience was as you and your family navigated that.
I mean, for it was five of us cooped up in an 1,100 square foot apartment. So, I mean, it was definitely
Wow.
challenging at times. Um,
Yeah.
and like all different, demographics. We have a young child, an older boy, and then a teenage girl, and then two kind of frantic, stressed out, 50-year-old adults. So, but it was we got by, and I like to say, like I'm alive. We're all alive. I'm
Hmm.
still married, and the kids are still functional. We still have jobs and a house, so I think
Yeah.
I'm happy with that. But for work wise, it was in some respects, a lot of people were drinking wine more than ever, but restaurants
Right.
closed, and selfishly, I the best part of the job that I like, which is actually seeing people, was something that I couldn't do, and I didn't quite
Mm.
realize how much that was impacting my mood until I got to go see people for the first time, and I realized like how much that I kind of fed off that energy. So I think in
Wow.
that respect, that was probably the worst part, is just not being able to go out and see people. And I'm glad that more than a year and a half later, we're able to kind of have some more normalcy. But still ways to go. But I really one of the things I did see is I think wine really did bring people together.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of ties, I think, a little bit maybe to what we'll be talking about, which is me just kind of look for like what can wine do to to I guess help things.
Yeah, and to help things. And so, Michael, all throughout COVID in general, you have been one of the Instagram accounts that have been very, very public about, the unrest in the world, and you wanting to have a sense of contribution to make things better. And just speaking of wine, I would love for you to update us as we were having a conversation just yesterday about what wine has been like for you, and I guess maybe even been a lot more purposeful, in your experience. So, tell our audience what that experience was like for you.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, I mean, I guess referring to my, I guess social media posts and stuff, I'd like to think that I guess if you look over my posts over the years, there's been kind of an evolution
Yeah.
and maturity. And hopefully that's happening, I think for all of us as we all kind of learn to try to harness this new power that we each have. Um,
Mm.
and in the early part of the pandemic in 2020, there really wasn't much that we could do. You just couldn't go out and see anybody. And as you saw, I guess as we got closer and closer to the presidential election, I think all of us, everybody, left, right, blue, red, whatever, everybody's become more politically engaged, and I think that
Right.
that's a good thing, no matter what's happening. For me, I was trying to think like, what can I do to leverage my background, my expertise, my connections, my profession to contribute somehow to the country and to what was
Mhm.
going on. And the thing that I kept returning to was that wine is a valuable commodity, and I was like, I have a few bottles of wine that are that would people would like to buy,
Mm.
and worth $100 more a bottle, and just thinking like maybe there are others that are out there that might have similar bottles like that, and maybe we could do like some kind of wine auction. So this was like in June where the idea was in my head, and like I think maybe other ideas have been kind of battering around, but like from that idea. Fast forward from the end of June to less than 4 months later, we'd pulled off a very successful online wine auction in October that raised $50,000 for the ACLU of
Wow.
Texas, and it,
Yeah.
for their voting rights initiatives. So, but I think to me that is not about me at all. It's the only thing I would say was about me. It was just kind of like there was this idea that was there, and from that idea, I was like so very fortunate to partner with like five other people who really became like the foundations of what we were doing. So the idea would have remained just an idea, and an interesting, cocktail discussion point if it wasn't for the other people that got involved. And that was Jeff Porter, Jake Lewis, Julia Coney, ICLU, and Laura Super were my partners in that endeavor. So, we all kind of came together and we made it happen. And I think
Mm,
I mentioned that to you because the vibe that you've always kind of like emanated is that really like you have the power to do anything. And to me, that was something that I got to experience like really palpably and meaningfully. And I saw it like happen really quickly. And it's still something that is like a visceral memory to me.
yeah. And so thank you for sharing that. I mean, really it goes to the testament of having a vision and then being able to believe in the vision and seeing it through. For you in particular, what was the mechanics of being able to choose the people and how did that get started? And I ask you that because people who listen to this podcast are always trying to figure out how to move beyond just an idea to
Mhm.
actually make it, manifest and bring into fruition. So what was your process?
Well, my process was talking to a lot of people, and I think that to me, this is where even
Uh,
like social media kind of comes into play because I think it's very easy to kind of bash on technology and modernization and social media, but I think that if we reorient how we think about it, social media is a tool.
hmm,
And I use that tool to kind of reach out to people that I know of, and there were random encounters with people like Jeff Porter, like I knew, but I think there was a random like direct message exchange between us that
hmm,
kind of sparked the talking about it. And I knew that he was from Texas, and he seemed to have like his heart in the right place as far as like political engagement. And another person I got to know solely because that was Jake Lewis. I'm talking about. I got to know because he was trying to. He had a Lego set. It was like the Apollo 19, whatever it was the Apollo rocket ship that Lego had built, and he had bought it, built it himself, and then he was using Instagram to kind of have that passed around to people. So he said, "Hey, whoever wants to use this, let me know, and I'm going to have this cycle through the hands of people." So it was like Legos would be repurposed.
mm.
I got to know him through that, and then from
Wow.
there, I got to meet other people. Julie Coney was another. Was another person who I met just by randomly direct messaging her on Instagram. And then, she is probably she has got to be on the forefront as far in the wine world as far as it reevaluating itself. She's probably definitely the most prominent black wine professional in the country, if not the world.
Wow. Wow. And so how did you all settle on the ACLU? Like what was the impetus for that organization?
Well, I mean, I guess to say like to think about what your audience might be thinking about is, I guess the idea. I kept trying. To me
Mhm.
personally, I didn't want to kind of be so wed to an idea that it was never going to happen. So, I mean, I kept trying to return my idea myself to like just the idea of, hey, I've got this wine. I want to unlock its potential to do some kind of good for the country. So, when we had our group together, we kind of talked about, do we want to raise money for a particular candidate? Do we want to raise money for a particular group? What would be the group that would be most useful? And actually, as it turned out, Jeff, Jake, and Julia all have deep roots in Texas, so we thought
Mhm.
maybe we could do something in that state. And from there, it just seemed like voting rights I guess, is politicized in a way, but I think fundamentally, expanding voter rights is something that we should all be behind. And that was something that I was happy to throw myself out there in the public sphere for, as were all of us.
Wow. Okay. And so now walk us through the raising of money. What was that process like and how are people getting on board? What was the enthusiasm behind those efforts?
Well, I mean, the enthusiasm. I guess it was for us. I guess the challenge wasn't necessarily raising the money. The challenge was getting donations of
Mm,
wine, and then
okay.
figuring out logistically how we were going to do that. Initially, we were going to work with an auction house, but then the timing wasn't going to work, so we had to kind of create an auction, like an auction platform online from scratch, and that was
Whoa.
largely led by Jake Lewis, who did that while he was kind of working harvest out in California, and did just amazing work with that. So it was that, and then once we had that platform, kind of like the structure, the idea of it, we had to then kind of publicize it and get people involved. So we were lucky. I mean, so lucky that we had a lot of people that were really engaged, because we didn't exist as of, I mean, frankly, really not until late August of 2020, and
Right.
we had an auction like 6 weeks later, and we managed to draw like 140 different bidders, and have most of our lots. Like we had about 90 plus lots. So a lot is like some kind of unit of wine that kind of makes sense. So maybe you pair
Mm.
three Barolos together, or maybe you have just a mix of wine. Is usually kind of organized around like who gave the wine, because just logistically we had to kind of keep that stuff together.
Yeah.
But we had over 90 lots of wine, just donated by just so many like great engaged people throughout the wine community, whether it's importers, distributors, producers, and lots of just kind of consumers.
Yeah. And so what was the conversation like as you were approaching all these people to donate? Were you just sharing what your efforts were, and what was like their excitement for it? The reason I say that is because again, just the whole idea to manifestation. So many people have these ideas and they're just like, how do I get this started? So what was that process?
I mean, I guess the process was, again, I guess kind of reaching out to the people that would seem the most receptive. So I guess it's kind of like the low hanging fruit, so to speak. Just in terms of like, if I mean, I guess we've kind of learned like with viruses, right? Like you want to figure out where is it going to be most contagious. So we would first reach out to those who we kind of knew had either donated wine in the past, or just seemed kind of politically engaged, or people that we had good relationships with who would be willing to kind of donate something. I don't think I know that this wouldn't have happened if it was just me. So the group was strengthened by the fact that everybody that was involved brought some kind of skill or set of connections. And I think it was the critical mass of people that, I mean, that randomly came together that I think made the group, and we were called Vines for Votes, but it was that kind of, I think, it was the variety of people that came together, and the variety of different connections we had, that I think was one of the strengths of what we did. If we had all been from the same group of people, we might not have had the reach that we had, because we were all different.
Yeah, talk about the power of collective action coming together from different spheres of life. For you, what surprised you the most about this process?
Um, I was most surprised by how, I think how hard people worked on something. I get, I guess I get a little choked up, because I mean, nobody had to do this, and everybody who was doing it, we were already in the midst of, a global crisis, right? And everybody was suffering professionally. Nobody was, people had lost jobs. People's, work was down dramatically, and despite that, I mean, we all came together, and that isn't even like include like just like the personal things that people were going through during this time, like other challenges outside of the global challenge that we were all facing. So I think, to me, what struck me the most was that the fortitude and the selflessness of the group to kind of see this through.
Yeah. Oh, Michael, thank you so much for sharing that. I think so many people, and this is why I really wanted to talk to you as a follow up. People don't ever, well, I should say people don't. Sometimes people don't feel that what they are doing, the profession that they're in, the space that they work in, has the power to be a vehicle that can create change and allow that more momentum to be able to spread, throughout their community, spread throughout the world in general. And you're a testament to we all have the ability to take what it is that we are doing and to creatively think outside of that for the whole. Don't you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, that was a lesson that I definitely took. Was like, I think, it really, it took a lot of work, and it definitely took a lot of sacrificed. But I think because it was tied to work that I that I love, and in that profession, there's so many good people that I respect immensely, that I think have their hearts in the right place. That it was easy to try to push. Now I and say that there were, there's other initiatives, other things that it doesn't always work, because I I think this all came about because since I couldn't get out, I was just using the phone to talk to people, and direct message people, as I alluded to. So this that happened really was the result of me talking to people for, and not even just in the last, like in that, in June of 2020, but for the last year before that, because there have been other things that I was talking to people about on totally different issue, because like 6 months before that, or 7 months before that, there were tariffs that were being threatened on wine, and actually got applied to
Right.
wine. And I was talking to friends and in the wine trade about how can we get activated there. So I think what I'd say is, like, if you've got if you have the notion, if you have the idea, not to say I think you have to become like obsessive and single-minded about it, but I think if you
Mhm.
don't give up on your idea and you take the opportunities that come to you, yeah, something can happen that could be small, but something can happen that can be big. And I think it's, in some respect, though, I'd say it is about balance. Like, I don't think I was like so single minded about this. I think it was more just like talking to people, say, oh, couldn't we do this or couldn't we do that? And
Right.
some ideas stuck, some ideas didn't, some ideas kind of banged around my head and they kind of die away, and then something kind of just sticks. And from that, I had the wine auction came about, and for that experience, I'll be forever grateful.
Yeah. And I think you just hit the nail right on the head on something that's really important for us all to get is that the relationships of today can support the projects and the causes of tomorrow. So many people are a little bit more transactional and thinking, what can I get from someone today to support my need and my cause? Rather than, unlike you, it seems like you have built relationships on authenticity and really just wanting to get a chance to know people.
Yeah, I mean, it was that, and again, I think again, because I think I feel lucky enough to be in a space where I feel like I
Mm,
can be myself, where it was
mm,
able to kind of feel more organic. And I also realized that there are plenty of people that maybe aren't in that position, and I think from there, it's just you've got to kind of have that idea, and massage it, think about it, or change it, talk to people about it. But really, I mean, at the end of the day, it was talking with people. I mean, there was, what we ended up doing was not about me. It was about people, and it was about six people that came together, and 50, 60, 70 plus donors who came together, and countless people who helped promote the auction, and then
mm.
the 100 plus bidders that got involved. So again, I had, my biggest
Yeah.
contribution was just the spark, but everything flows from there, and everybody was an equal, or I'd say even more important contributor.
Yeah. And what was the organization's response when they received the money?
They were so very, very grateful, and
Wow.
it took me a while to even kind of contact them, because we said, hey, let's raise money for the ACLU of Texas, and then there's a pandemic going, so I didn't know if they were in their office or not, and I'm sure they probably had other people say, hey, we'd like to raise money for you, and and I'm sure any amount is appreciated, but when we did it, we also wanted to make it not just a promotional thing about wine, but also an educational thing. So we were educating people about like what the ACLU of Texas does. We were talking about voting rights. We were talking about Texas, because we didn't. It wasn't something about, say, like, we didn't want to like shame Texas. We didn't want to make this about like, oh, bad things are happening in Texas. We want to talk about Texas is an awesome state, and there's so much
Right.
that we don't know about it, and there's so many preconceptions that like New Yorkers may have about Texas. So here are the people
Hmm.
that are from Texas, and this is the great things about Texas. Here's the food from Texas. So it was more. We tried to make it a very, I mean, celebratory, I guess, kind of uh, tone.
Yeah. And Michael, before I let you go, it's something very fascinating and just so interesting about what wine does in bringing us all together. And even when I first met you at the 92nd Street Y, you spoke a little bit about the community of what wine does for us. And so for you, as just somebody that is an expert, you are someone who's a consumer. What does wine, what has it done for you, and what do you think is its benefit for all of us?
I mean, I think wine. Um, what I've come to realize, what I see with wine, and I think is you realize how interconnected we all are. I think
Hmm.
there are lots of jobs where you get so caught up in documents and emails and whatever that you might kind of lose sight of the interconnectedness we have. But like from a vine first being planted by somebody to 3 years later the first harvest, and field workers that are out in the vines kind of tying vines to to cables so that they're trellised the right way, to winemakers, to the truck drivers that have to drive the wine to a ship, and then the ship's captain that's got to take it across the ocean or wherever, to here, and to the warehouse workers, and to the restaurants, and the guys that have to carry 30-pound boxes up and down stairs, like, to finally getting a bottle on a shelf or in a cellar and then being poured. And we're
Mm.
all so much more interconnected than I think we appreciate. And I'm sure every profession probably kind of highlights that, but with wine, because it's so tangible, it kind of drives that point home to me more than anything I've ever thought of before.
Wow. And Michael, I'll let you have the last word on this. The power of interconnectivity, being connected to something greater than yourself. You and this group, you all are a testament of that. People deciding to come together for a cause bigger than themselves and to be able to be supportive of that. What do you say to someone who's listening to this podcast who feels that they have something to contribute, but they don't know where to start? They know there's something inside of them, there's a burn, there is a itch to create impact, but they're not sure as to how to begin that journey.
I would say first that, I mean, anybody who's watching this is fortunate to be in your community, Clay, because your community is about hope and empowerment, and
Mm.
I'm sure lots of other things. And I think within that there's a network of people, whether you and anybody else who's a follower of yours, been a client of yours, whatever. And I think it's just talk to people about that idea, like just throw it out there. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. I mean, if somebody kind of rejects it or dismisses it, think about why they dismissed it, but don't give up on it. Maybe they've raised a good point, but be patient with yourself, and just reach out to people. Not everybody can talk about it. Like, just what I've found is, it just in my work, is that people like to give advice, people like to give feedback, and believe in your idea, and believe that also that your idea may not quite be what it is. Like, the idea that you start with is not the idea that you finish with, and that's the result of all those conversations. So as long as you have the discipline to see that through, and also the flexibility to understand that your idea in its initial form may not be what it is in the final form,
Yeah.
just kind of go forward, press on, be patient, and believe in it, be sensible about it. But when the time comes, be ready to work hard and make it happen.
Yeah. Listen, Michael, you are, I believe, the very best of what New York City represents. And, I know people are, I'm a little biased. 'Cause I love New York, but you're the best of what this world represents. And I really love how every time you and I engage and have conversation, you take it to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. And the evolution you were talking about, just even in your social media posts, you are literally living that out. And I cannot say thank you enough because it really makes a difference to all of us.
Well, thank you, Clay, and I appreciate the kind words, and I think we're all very lucky to be in New York, because I think that there's life is not perfect, people aren't perfect, but I think what we've seen in the last year and a half is that there's a lot of good people out there, and I think we
That's
need
right.
to pay less attention to the media that trumpets the few bad people, and embrace the fact that most people, right, left, black, white, whatever, it doesn't make a difference, have their hearts in the right place, and we need to kind of focus on that.
Yeah. So listen, Michael, I know people probably want to reach out to you to connect, especially on that spark of an idea and how big it can, grow to be. Where can folks do that, and where can they learn more about you?
On Instagram, you just find me at MJWBKNY. So that's my initials, and then reference to Brooklyn, New York, where I live. Or you can feel free to email me at mjwhidden, WHIDDEN, at gmail.com.
All right, listen, folks. So I want to first thank Michael for being on today's podcast. Of course, as you all know, I'll have all of Michael's information at the show notes, which you find the base of the podcast. You can learn more about me by visiting clayswilliams.com. And I'm on all your favorite social media by the handle of @PlanA with Clay. And remember, folks, Clay's with a K. Thanks for listening. I look forward to seeing you in our very next episode of Plan A Conversations. Peace, folks.